And we're live. So welcome to a Google Hangout with myself, Oliver R. Shead, and Brandon Williams and Julian Bell. We're three indie designers here to discuss how to be a good player for BrigadeCon 2015. There you go. I had a mental lapse there for a moment. So Brandon, would you like to do the honors first and introduce yourself to whoever may be viewing this now or in the future?
Yeah, my name is Brandon Williams. I am the creator of the Arcanum Syndicate and the designer for the Chaos 6010 AD Dark Future role-playing game, as well as the upcoming DemonGate Dark Fantasy role-playing game, which I hope to see beginning of next year.
Brilliant. And Julian?
Yeah, I am Julian Bell. I'm the creator of Kromore and also the host of the Evolve podcast, which you've been on.
I have indeed.
There you go.
Fantastic. Well, I think we can kick this off with how to be a good player. I'd like to start by saying something interesting that I've been looking at recently with some of my players and what makes them good players or not so good, or really excel. And one of the things that I like personally is collaborative storytelling with the PC. You can have it where the GM is the bad guy, and you're like, don't tell your secrets to the GM. Don't, he's going to kill us. He's trying to hunt us down. He's out to get us. And I've had fun with that too, where I'm the evil mastermind. But I notice when I play as a player, I prefer to collaborate with the GM. I no longer take it as a competition against him, because he's always going to win anyway. So I usually come at it from a different angle, and I go, what kind of cool story can I tell out of this? How can I help to enhance the storytelling that's going on? What do you reckon about that?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good idea. I wanted to say one of the most important things to me is for first-time players. If you've never played the game before, this was something interesting that we did. Somebody that's never played the game before, you have no idea what you're getting into. One of the guys suggested, why don't you just look at these miniatures? If you use miniatures, we use a lot of miniatures. I like to mix a little bit of wargaming with my RPG too. Just because it's so much easier to see like line of sight, and it makes it more fun for us anyway. Another level of fun. But for first-time players, just giving them something easy, like pick any of the miniatures that you like. Pick the miniature. This is what your character's going to be. It just makes it easy for them to like visualize what their character is. Okay, this is who I am, and then build your character off of that little guy there. That's something we use anyway.
Interesting idea.
Yeah, for me with GM relationship, that's always super important. I tend to run a lot of games myself, so I do find it difficult to try to help players be better players if there's 4 or 5 players or 6 players in a game. So one of the things I find is helpful is actually promoting player-to-player relationships. I find a lot of times if a player has a really cool role-play idea and they want to do something with their backstory with the character, I try to incorporate that with another character's backstory and try to get those two to work off each other, because then they can play off each other. If I'm working with somebody else in the group, or if another GM's going, I can kind of role play slightly with someone else in the group, and then we can take that and bring it back to the group. I think ultimately at the end of the day, just listening to the players around you as a player, not so much listening to the GM, of course, they're telling the story and you want to listen to what they're saying, but listen to what the other players say as they role play their characters, because you can bounce off that and you can then develop your character bigger in this world around you, as opposed to just it's me and the GM and these other 4 people are playing a game with the GM as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I find it a real challenge when you get a large group. I'm not like a massive group. I went to SeedCon recently and I saw there was a group there of 32 players at one time. That was pretty impressive. There was about, I think, 8 GMs or something. But even so, for me, like about the most I've tried was about 8, and I found that was um, just far and away more challenging to get anything done and make it at all fun uh, for anyone. Whereas if you got 1 or 2, you can develop intricate storyline, lots of plot and things like this, and have a lot of ample opportunities for role playing. That being said, you've got a lot more burden on them to be good at it. If they're not good and they're completely new, it can be a bit of a challenge for them. So I think that's also some of the best ways to learn. But as you say, also like learning with miniatures is good, and also learning with other players, like in that sort of relationship, and they start to bounce off other players and see how they react to different things that the GM's throwing at them, or the ventures throwing at them, is really quite interesting, because then they start to go, oh, okay, this is the dynamic I've got with these other guys. I've always found that the most interesting thing when you join a group that you're a new player to. I played a Mafia game a while back, and I was the new player, and I was just immediately the noob. I will give him the bad jobs. You go over there. We'll laugh at you as you get bitten by a dog or something. Really quite funny, but it enhanced the whole experience. I felt like a new, soldier in the Mafia.
Yeah.
Having a role definitely helps a player feel like they're part of a group. Sometimes it's good that people don't have set Holy Trinity roles, but for new players, having that role, that niche in the group where they have to help out, they have to be the soldier, they have to be the healer, they have to do these particular tasks, involves them and makes them part of the group. And I think if they embrace that and then kind of take risks with that, it helps them kind of grow as a player.
I've something I always tell people is to play a character that you want to play. One thing is I've never played a character that I didn't like. I've never had a character I didn't enjoy playing. Play the character that you want to play. Don't just play the healer if the group needs it. That's how I do it in my group anyway. You pick what you want so that you're going to be happy, because it is all about having fun, and just pick what you want to play so that you're happy playing the game. And if everybody needs a healer, you don't end up having a healer, maybe that could be that part could be taken by an NPC, or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've never personally liked restricting what my players can play. I've always liked to just let them be whatever. So if you've got a whole party full of rangers, well, fine.
Yeah.
Depends on what sort of game you're playing. D&D, class is really, really important. Other games, it's not as important. It's all about the skills they take or whatever. That's more my preference, but both work. I think actually one of the great things about a class-based system is that it does give you that role, and that really does help, particularly new players, to go, oh, this is what I do. I go and smash the things, or I stay back and I heal people, or I shoot them with my bow, and then they can start to get some idea of that. And then later on they can get more complex into the role-playing if they wish, but I think at the beginning it's hard enough just working out, oh, I can chop things. That's cool.
Yeah.
My model can go over here and smash that one.
And there's so many people that certain people will get bored with the too much role playing. There's always that guy, there's too much talking going on, I have to kill something. I have experienced those many times.
Yeah, you definitely have to figure out as a GM too to balance for your players who's new, who's experienced, who needs those kind of special treatments of more combat, more role play, and how to kind of weave that together for the GM. But as a player, I think realizing the GM is doing that as well is sometimes important to for the players to realize, hey, GM's not spending any time with me, but maybe that's because there's 4 other people right now and he's trying to move through, or that storyline's happening this week, maybe next week my character's storyline. And a good way to, if you feel like you might get left out as a player and you want to be better, as this whole podcast is about, is to maybe involve yourself and take part in whatever that character's story is or whatever that moment going on. Take a role and establish your character there, and then all of a sudden those two characters are now part of that same story. You're not by yourself in that whole individualistic idea. So you're a group, so jump in. What can you do to help that character? The best moments I've ever had as the GM is when 2 or 3 people start coming up with an idea on their own just because their characters want to do something together. And then all of a sudden the GM has to take the story in that route because, hey, guess what? They're all having a blast doing this. What my idea was terrible, apparently. So let's do that instead. Now they're all having fun. So as a player, you got to kind of say, okay, what's going on around me? And how can I make my character story fit in here? And now I'm going to go and jump in.
Yeah, that works really well. I also I've had whole campaigns run that way. In fact, sometimes long running campaigns where they know where they have objectives and things, but they set their own objectives. They're like, you know what, I'm going to raise an army. I'm going to go destroy that country. And 5 years of gaming later, they've finally got that army and they're coming back. And they're like, finally, yes. And I find those, to be honest, to be the most engaging, the most fun for them and for me, because I don't have to tell them what to do. I don't have to give them hints. They're just like in it going, I'm going to go this, I'm going to check out that contact over there. And they know enough about the world and they know enough about how to play that they can just roll with it. And then they're creating the story really on their own, which is awesome, really. And I just throw them the curveballs, give them the fun times.
Yeah, true. Do you guys, I don't know if you guys do this, but do you make sure that the players all read about the history before they play the game?
The history of the setting or their own character?
Yeah, the history of the setting.
Actually, usually I give that verbally, and I get them to experience it as they go along. But I guess that's also because I don't usually write down a whole bunch of history, or if I do, it's for a setting, and then it's like 10,000 words, and they don't really feel like reading the whole thing. Unless they get really keen. Depends on them. If it's in my notebook format, good luck to them. Give them usually a rundown. They do sometimes say, like, look, your worlds change a lot. It's kind of hard to tell what the history is this time. That's because they change from being low fantasy to high fantasy to epic. And I'm like, yeah, testing, just testing. There's no dragons now, there's dragons everywhere.
I run a weekly game for Kromore, but over 5 years, I don't think I've ever once filled the players in with all of the information that they needed. I kind of like that experience of it's the first time they're experiencing it, so their character's also experiencing for the first time. If there's an information they need to know, this race is like this town is like this, that's of course something I'm going to give them, but I love throwing them in to the complete unknown, because for them everything's new, everything's fresh, and it's exciting. I may have told this story about this town 1,000 times already, but for them it's the first time they've ever seen it. So some other players may have been there in other games and they might say, oh, this is where this is, right? And they're like, oh really, there's this over here? And that new player could then get themselves involved. And as a player, if they don't know the setting and the GM's only giving them kind of that sprinkles of information, maybe that's because they want the character to figure it out. So if you are a player, explore, take a risk. The biggest thing when you mentioned the title of this podcast was, to me, I was thinking, oh, take a risk, take a risk. For new players, one of the biggest things you can do in a game to make you feel like part of the group and for that memory to last as like a long-standing story moment in a game that you'll remember a year from now, take any risk you can. Not a silly risk per se, like, oh, I'm going to steal that guy's money and then go give it to this guy over here, or I'm going to go light the tavern on fire, or whatever the name type of game you're playing. But take a risk to save someone, even though you might not be able to. You might fail, you might die, but either way, it's an awesome story moment. So.
Yeah, there was one thing I wanted to bring up too is don't try to be the player that stops the action. I've seen this happen a lot of times, especially with players that are playing with a group of maybe beginners, and they've been playing for a long time. They'll no, don't do that. Don't jump in there to save that guy, because you might end up getting killed. Don't do that. You know what I mean? That happens a lot.
Yeah, that's right. And you can also get gamers who are fairly experienced who then get kind of jaded and they're like, oh yeah, I see a plot hook. Oh yeah, I see it. Yeah. What's in it for me? Whatever. Don't feel
Mm.
like it. Not doing it. And they'll sort of just be the killjoy. And
Yeah, let's.
that can be really
Well,
hard. I mean, I've played as characters like that where it's like I'm completely selfish and I have no desire whatsoever to go on a certain quest to rescue a princess. To some degree, I think that's fine. To some degree, I think if you're with a party that's not like that, then you should probably work out how you can be part of it because you want to forward the momentum of the group rather than detract from it. That being said, also you can have your own motivations. One of my players decided to play a secondary character once, so he wanted to take less of the action. He was a drunk monk in this samurai setting. That was him in a nutshell. He just wanted to get drunk. He just wanted to stay drunk. No monetary interest, no nothing. But he ended up being the ninja finder, kind of ironically. And
there's
the,
yeah, playing on that. One of the things I find in some of the games I've played for other players to be memorable, people that have come back year after year, or I played with them 2, 3 years ago, and then they show up again. I do a lot of kind of like cold call sessions where some new people will come in every 6 months, and then after that, pull in a new group of people. And then the live games I play are my friends' games or people I know for years. But those other games, they always remember the players like that who had no other purpose than just their predetermined goals in the world. I want one guy in particular. He was a tea maker, just like the drunk monk kind of character. All he wanted to do was sell tea in the world and bring his new brand of tea to people. And he'd up role playing that in every single session, and it's memorable. Other characters remember that character, and would
yeah.
later in other games say, "Hey, do you have this tea by this guy?" And it was from that character, and it was completely years later. This one character was like, "Oh, is there a tea in this town made by this guy?" I was like, "It's not in the book. That's not something that goes on. It's just one of those moments that player created that." So you don't always have to kill stuff, and avoid,
Yeah.
like you were saying, Brandon. Avoid that death. Oh, don't go in there. Yeah, he's gonna kill us if you're going. You're too low level. Don't do that. But those players
Mm.
that do that are remembered, and that's always something to
Yeah,
think of. You know.
exactly. If you stop it, that might add something totally new to the story and make it even that much more fun.
Yeah.
Um, people sometimes, or people that want to cheat a little bit. Oh, I can't fail this roll. So yeah, I rolled pretty well there, actually. You know, it becomes so much more hilarious when you do fumble, or
Yeah.
you do launch that missile into your allies.
It's interesting, isn't it? I've got a friend of mine who rolls really, really well, and he's extremely good at tactics and diplomacy, and he generally just comes out on top on everything, right? But at certain points, his characters will have weaknesses, right? It's usually like a pretty girl or a diplomatic moment where he thinks, oh, it'd be really funny if I said blah, and then he rolls and it's like, oh, I guess I say that. Now everyone wants to kill me. That's fine. It's fine. I'm just gonna run really fast in the other direction. But to his credit and as a good player, what he'll do is he'll go, okay, I'll roll with this, and then he'll make it worse even. He'll say, you know what, I throw my sword right into the wall and it shatters, or whatever, and then I drop to the ground screaming, even though the orc's there with his axe.
Yeah,
Make it fun, but also make it like characterful, make it like, what would his character do, and that also is a great question to ask yourself. What would my character do in this case? Would he would he actually do this, or would he actually end up taking this what is potentially a bad move? And quite a people would really take the bad move, ironically, which is more fun actually.
What would let me propose a question for you. So, a
Yeah.
brand new player coming into RPGs, never played before. The friends tell them, come play this game. They don't know anything about it. They're watching this podcast. What advice or what would you tell them stepping in for the first time as how to approach as a new player, and to what things to do as a new player to be that good player?
Well, I think first of all they should have a basic idea of who their character is, right? they should work on getting as good an idea of who the character is as possible. So they should ask questions about the character, about the abilities, about how it all works, and get a basic idea of how to roll, how to make a basic roll. You know, every game's got a basic skill roll. With D&D, it's like a D20. You roll them idiot high, and, you know, different ones is different things. So if they have that concept and they get their idea of who their character is in a nutshell, then they can start to work out the relationship with the other players, and they can start to work out what world they're in. And if they start to really think how their character thinks about the world rather than what they think about the world, that's a really different point of view. For example, I had a really new player come in, and he started playing in my Infected game, and he definitely thought about zombie apocalypses before, but he had this commitment to speaking like the character. And he said, you know, some guy was saying, "Oh, I'm going to sleep in this car," and he goes, "Don't sleep in the car, man. Don't sleep in the car, dude. Man, those infected, they'll get you in the car. Haven't you seen people die in the car? Dude, they'll swarm the car, man. They know you're in there." And it was just like, I'd never even thought about it, right? And he was just raving on about this. "Don't go in there, man. I'm not going there. I go down the road and blah, blah, blah." And you know what? He was first ever game. And he sounded like a pro. He sounded like he knew exactly what he was talking about. So, I mean, that sort of thing. Research, looking at your character's perspective, and then committing. Really, and not feeling silly about it, because everyone will really appreciate it. The moment you put on that Texan accent, and you look the part, and you start chewing your tobacco or whatever it is that you do, people will appreciate it and they'll remember you. What do you guys reckon?
Yeah, I think when I get a new player, you know, just let them know. Try to get into character. You know, you can make your own accent if you want to. You know, just as if you were playing a character in a TV show or a movie. Get into the character a little bit. Yeah, like you were saying, definitely read about the race or the class that you're playing. You should definitely know about them a little more before you step into whatever you're going to be. You are not invincible. I had a guy that was playing an ogre, and just because he was an ogre, he thought he could punch the oncoming truck that was coming at him at full speed, and he ended up just getting run over and almost killed. And I was like, "You are not the Hulk. Remember, I told you, you're not invincible." When you first start out, just remember to, you know, ease into it, be cautious, play as if it was really you, you know. For the most part, anyway.
Not everyone has wings. Not everyone breathes fire.
Right.
But yeah, you know,
you don't?
have fun with it. Yeah, well, every now and then, a few drinks. Yeah, have fun. That's the key that I always tell the new people at Gen Con. There was a girl in one of the groups that I was running, first time ever, and her group of friends was also their gaming group from home. I'm not sure where they were from, but the girl never played before. She was really nervous, and she was probably one of the best players as well in the group, just because she didn't have any sort of preconceived notions of what she could and she couldn't do, and everyone just kind of allowed her to feel like she could do anything. So you can do anything in the game you want, so do it, and there'll be a role that I'll find for you to have to make. And she did it, and at the end of it, she said, "Thanks so much. That was awesome." She goes, "I was so nervous about it. I didn't know if I'd like it." She says, "I loved it, absolutely loved it." And it just goes to show, you know, if you're open about it as a GM or players, and there's new people around. For me, I always kind of inform other people, you know, to help them get in. Don't put any limitations on what they have to do. You know, like you were saying before, Brandon, like, "Oh, don't do that. Your character can't do that well." I say the opposite. Try everything. I want to do this. I want to do that. There's going to be a role for it, and if there's not, somebody will make one up, and it'll be cool that you came up with something that might not even exist in the game. If you can't do it well, guess what? Next time, maybe you make your character to do that well, and then you figured out how you want to build a character. So yeah, take risks and just go crazy, have fun. Don't think about the rules. Just think about playing.
Right. But don't get everybody killed either.
Then they won't want you to come back.
Yeah. I've had I've
I
had
oh, go on.
I've had players uh immediately start out. I'm gonna rob the magic shop, and you know that's sometimes not such a great idea when you get the whole town guard after you, and it can be fun. It can be fun, and as a GM, you might get stuck trying to keep the players alive through most of the adventure, but definitely have fun. That is certainly the whole premise of gaming.
Absolutely. Something interesting that I find as well, as I mentioned it kind of before, is a friend of mine purposely went out and made a secondary character because there were 4 people playing, and it seemed like a lot. And he went, you know what? I'm not going to make a character who's supporting. I want to make a character who's in the background purposefully. And you know what? He started it, and then he ended up liking it a lot, ironically. And he made a whole bunch of them, and really characterful characters. I mean, he's always got quirky, weird characters, but none of these were combat-focused characters, particularly. And our game sort of went from being totally combat-focused to just a chunk of it, and then now they're like less and less, right? Much more story-based, which is kind of weird for me, but cool. And he went from, playing like I'm playing the mage or whatever to like the drunk monk, and he started working out how he could tie in with the group left and right, bring all the different groups together. That dude's over there and he's split the party. Okay, I'll bring him back in, and he could do all that stuff because he could just sort of move around in the background, end up dealing with this guy, and most of his interactions were with players, in fact. And he was like the glue that held the whole group together. It was really quite interesting. At the same time, he never really fought anything particularly, and his abiding wish was just to get drunk. And so he didn't really forward the plot per se, but then he held it all together. He got them all participating, and then he'd find something out and be like, "Oh, do I tell them? Oh, fine, I'll tell them." Gee, and then that saves all their lives. And he really thinks about next time I better not, because he gets a better judgment of just not getting involved with these sorts of silly things. So I think also, you can have a character that's daring and unusual and breaks the mold. Doesn't even have to be like taking risks in a physical sense, but like a role-playing sense. You've got an oddity of like a strange character, a character that you would not normally play as well. That's a fun one. You can find people tend to get stuck in molds. Like I like to play the Elven Ranger guy, and every game you play, it's pretty much an Elven Ranger.
Cookie cutter character. Yeah.
What was that? Sorry.
Sorry, the cookie cutter character is what we call it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But they can be deep as well. But you end up just playing something that's kind of a bit similar, each time. And they've all got their own unique storyline, but they're still the warrior type. However they do it, they could blast them with whatever, chop them with whatever, but they're still a warrior type, right? But then you can challenge yourself as a player once you start getting, you've got that character type down. Well, then why don't you branch out and try something that is a risk for you, like someone you wouldn't normally play. A friend of mine, again, also didn't like French accents, and didn't like sort of arty-farty types, and so I said he's got to play a French artist. So it was a challenge for you. He went, "Oh, damn it!" Okay, and it's one of his favorite characters now, ironically. He always used to bag me out for my French accents. Oh, croissant.
That's an interesting take on it. Another thing is some of the characters want to, when you're making your character, you want to set a goal. What does this character want to do with his, existence or whatever it is? What's his goal? What drives him? Is he looking for more gold? Is he looking for adventure? It can basically make the whole, standing ground of the character is just something simple like that. Or like you were saying, he's just a drunk. He's seeking more alcohol,
But I think it's better when you have deeper origin stories and backgrounds and lots of stuff for the narrator to play with, the GM. Because, the GM has to tie all these threads together. And particularly if you've got 4 players and they're all going in different directions,
Yeah.
It's a bit like, well, where do I start? I could do that. Two of them will like, but the other two won't for different reasons. So I'm never going to please them all. So I think creating like a deep, rich backstory with the narrator, even like, you go, oh, but what if this tied into that? And then, oh, that would be terrible for me, but kind of cool. And I've done that, and my players have done that, and it really adds to the story. And makes it easy to give them a story that they love, because then they're like, oh, that guy is my arch nemesis. Oh, he's so powerful. He's always stuffing up my plans. But now you go, cool. So this guy's now he's a catalyst. This is really cool. It's
I like
it's certainly different, I think.
I like that having a catalyst like that of something in the background. I when I was early into my gaming days, I found a lot of times I wanted to game all the time, but I didn't have enough players to make a big group. So I often gamed one-on-one, and one-on-one games would be like one session or two sessions, and then you add those two or three other people when they can make it. And I found a really interesting thing doing it as a GM was doing solos with each and every player to introduce their character into the game. So they already had a background with the world. They already knew where they came from and who they hate, who their enemies are, who their friends are. And then when they reach the other characters, it's like, oh, you're just joining the game. But each one has already started their own game. So it kind of really made them feel
That's
like they
awesome.
could be cohesive. It's a really interesting thing to do, and it's tough because not everyone can do that. But I found I was like, man, this is an interesting way to game. And someone did it for me as a player, and then I joined a bigger game, and I was like, wow, I had this huge world already in my mind where I fit in. And it just was a really cool thing to do with the group. So if you're a GM and you want to help players feel like they're part of it, having them write a little story and then saying, okay, that's cool, I'll work it in. Instead of doing that, just do a 1-2 hour session with them, with each player, and then incorporate everybody together. It'll make the game 1,000 times more interesting.
That
Of
is a good
course,
idea.
yeah, you don't want them to die the first session. That would be bad.
Yeah.
I've made it come close sometimes. Also, if you're running low on time, you can actually do that briefly with each character, intro them. Again, with infected, sometimes you got to work out how they survived, and so you can briefly run through, and then at certain crisis points, like you go, okay, you ended up running this way and fleeing and surviving, and then at some point, then you check and you go, you make a roll, okay, good. At some point, this happens, and then it's like something they've got to fight, and then maybe they get injured and they're wounded for a long time, and then a year later something else happens, they're going to make a diplomacy roll or something like that, and then you see where they end up in the society that they're in, or how they arrived there, or why they're adrift, or how they haven't starved to death, and they get this sense of, wow, it's been tough for me. God, I've really lived through a lot. Or, oh yeah, I made it out okay. I got out on top. I'm always on top, and it just adds so much more. But you can do it, in just a few minutes each person. But as you say, yeah, be careful not to kill them. Or you could do it like the Traveler Syndrome. Oh, sorry, the character's dead. Try again.
Yeah, character creation killed off my character. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
having that emotional attachment definitely is something that players, those that have it, seem to enjoy it more. Those that don't have that connection to their character seem to kind of drift off or miss sessions more often, or they get grumpy
Yeah.
because they don't feel like they're a part of it. I think if they connect with the character on their own, in their own head, they can imagine things better. Even if they're not involved in what's going on in the moment, they can still think, oh, this is what I'm doing. I've had a lot of people say that to me over the years of, oh, remember when we were doing this in the game and this happened and that? I'm like, man, I don't remember any of that. And then I realized, oh, that was them thinking that's how they perceived the scene, and
Yeah.
I don't remember that at all. But for them, it was super enjoyable because they remembered it. They were in their own head thinking about it. I mean, that's really the whole point why we do this, right? Is to have those cool story moments and get them to feel something out of it. But yeah, as a player, just jump in, both feet,
I
no
I had
mistakes.
that reminds me of a game we did. They were stuck. The players were stuck out in the wastelands, and they're all traveling together. And one of the players takes me aside and he says, "I really don't like this character anymore. He's just an evil, a-hole. I don't think he's going to be able to like tie in with the group anymore. I kind of want to get rid of him and make a new character." I was like, why don't you just why don't you just kind of form him into what you want, you know? Just make that whole depth part of his story, you know? Just kind of like make him change a little bit, something to change him a little bit to make him not such a bad guy. You know what I mean? Because that's really cool having that bad guy past, you know, and then somebody who starts to change into a good guy, you know. A lot of some of my favorite, you know, Game of Thrones episodes, stuff like that. Uh, you know, their characters are kind of like that. So I tell him this, and I tried to throw in even this little hook. He's sitting by himself, away from the other players, you know. And he's all grumpy. Nobody wants to do what I want to do, you know. And then so I had this little girl come over and give him a flower she had found in the wastelands. And this little girl had her mother, and they were refugees, you know, that they were kind of leading to safety, the whole party. And I kind of threw that in there just to like maybe help him give a little tinge of feeling or emotion. Uh, so the little girl felt sorry for him and went and gave him a flower or something just real small to maybe spark a little bit of story change in his background, you know. Something like that. I know it's stepping out a little bit of GM, but can help a player, I guess, even with their backstory, form into something that they really enjoy playing, I guess.
Did he feel that little girl's change? Did it make a big difference, or did he not take
He did not take the hook. I even told him after the session was over, I was like, I tried to throw something in. He's like, no, my guy's he's horrible. I was like, okay.
You've got no redeeming qualities at all. Yeah.
That's funny. I had a player that did something similar. They made a character that was so evil, but they became more evil as the game went on. They didn't start that. They started a little evil, and he was an evil sorcerer, basically, who wanted more power, and he wanted to control things. But he wasn't evil. He was just this guy that wanted power, wanted to know more. And he eventually became that lawful evil kind of concept of a character. And by 10 sessions in, the bad guys, there's two boats, and they were fighting each other, and the one had the bad guys on it, the good guys were on the other. He basically got rid of all the bad guys except the bosses, and the bosses were fleeing. And so I decided at that moment, I said, he's so evil right now, it doesn't make sense he's with them. So the bosses, as they're fleeing, he went over the side to kill them, and they said, why don't you come with us? And that was it. That was he just had this eureka moment. He goes, oh my God, yes, I'm going to go with you, and I'm going to soon take over this whole evil world enterprise. And that character became Arcades of Azeroth, which is a huge evil villain in the Kromore universe who lives for thousands of years. So from there on, I built that character's story into the lore of the world. It's just amazing that he did that. He was like, yes, I'm leaving. My character's gone. I'm done. He goes, that's it. That's where he leaves. And it was just this epic moment for him and for the game. And everybody's like, what? He left? He became a bad guy? What? He's no longer with us? And so the player made another character later on who ended up joining the party. But that character was
reminds
gone.
me. When
That's so good. That's so good.
that reminds me, one other thing I tell players is when you're gonna name your character, name him something original, like, oh, I'm gonna make my guy Conan. Like, name him a character that's original, because you never know. Like in situations you were just talking about, you never know when that character is going to become legendary. That character can become part of a book or a story that you might want to tell later. You know.
Yeah, definitely. I use that all the time. I always, if there's a great character, it just sticks in my mind. I go, you know what? He's now lore of this world, so let's just put him in. Let's make it happen.
Yeah.
And it makes them feel more connected to it too. They're like, I know it. That's me. That's my guy.
Yeah.
But they might have 3 or 4 in the world. So it's
Right.
definitely a nice moment for players to feel like they can be part of the world.
It's funny about those names though. Remember a couple of characters that I was playing with for many years, right? And one of them was just called Jake. That's it. That's his name. The other guy is called Jez. And it's like, okay. So everyone's like, and I am, Ubertron the Magnificent, blah blah blah. And then they're like, oh, this is Jake and Jez. It's like, oh, well, okay, whatever. I need a better name. It was funny though because I got such a reputation that everyone was like, oh.
The great and powerful Jake.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
World Destroyer.
Yeah, that's right. he had lots of titles, but it just never really stuck. You know, we just looked at him and was like, yeah, you're Jake. Yeah.
Yeah, I like
Good
that,
try.
Brandon. That's good. Unique original names definitely make a difference. It's unfortunate sometimes when players come in and they're like, oh, my guy's gonna be Ugug, or my guy's, same thing, Jake. My guy's
Yeah.
Jake. Jake
What would be
Smith.
Iron Man?
Yeah, Iron Man. Yeah, that's it. Just doesn't fit the character. Or Beathor. I've had somebody that made their character Beathor. Great character, played it awesome, really cool, but it would never become part of the lore or anything existing beyond.
Yeah,
Because you're Beathor.
like you were saying before, I've had characters. This campaign ended up lasting 3 years, I think, 3 to 5 years actually. It was ongoing for a long time, and this was in our chaos, my chaos game. Um, One of the players ended up slowly turning evil. He was a gray mage. He's slowly turning evil, and became more and more corrupt. Uh, and he just became such a good bad guy, though, um, that at the end of the years, we totally split the groups, and we had to make two different groups because one whole group was all evil and one group was all good. And it came down to this huge epic battle at the end of the 4 or 5 years that we played the campaign, where they all just had it out in the middle of the city. And it was so legendary. It makes such a great book. I still want to write it this day.
That is interesting how players can end up coming against each other because you play in character and your character might go down a dark path and somebody else doesn't. And I've had that happen a number of times, but one of the worst times that happened ended up with almost a TPK. One guy was like, "That's it, can't take this anymore, total party wipe time," and then it was just on, and everyone was killing each other. And
Yeah.
to this day, they regret it. They're like, "Oh, that was the best campaign we ever played. Like now it's over." And it's kind of interesting that as a player as well that is a choice you can make. But I think also, you know, you'd have to make sure that other people are kind of happy to have that in the story. That, like for in your one, for instance, it made an epic part of the story. In my one, it was an epic story, but that was the end of that story.
Yeah.
And maybe they should have done that after the campaign had finished.
Yeah.
I listened to myself not to make things too creepy on flying ships. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can overdo the drama.
I think there's something to be said about that for players too, for players to be good players. And I'm not a fan of lawful evil and lawful good. They exist, but in reality, I mean, in our world, on Earth, um, I don't know about other planets existing yet, but on Earth, there's a small percentage that are really, really evil. There's some people out there that are just truly evil people. So they exist. And at the same time, there's people out there that are wholly, perfectly good people, genuinely would give anything to be a good person to anyone. So those are extreme outliers. Everybody else is kind of squished right in the middle. This gray area of sometimes I'm good, sometimes I'm bad, sometimes I'm neutral, sometimes I just don't care. Um, so when you're thinking about playing your character, you don't have to play those stereotypes. I know some games, D&D particularly, has those. I have to play this, I have to play that. But for everybody else out there, um, you don't have to be, oh, I have to be good, my character's good. I have to be bad, my character's bad. You can be in the middle, and that's almost the better player to be because now you can make more choices. You have
Yeah.
so many things you do. You can make a choice in the moment to be bad or to be good or to be gray area. What's good to you might be bad to somebody else, and that's even better storytelling. So as a player, you know, make the conscious effort to not be anything and to just be that character. That's something to be said. That helps save people from, oh, I got to kill you, I'm evil, or I gotta save you, I'm good.
Right.
It's always interesting to me in games where I remember I saved once as a player when I was very young, one of the early games playing. I was in college, and an NPC that the GM wanted to kill off was going to die. A volcano was exploding. The lava was rolling down. It cut off our path from his path, and he's about to get overwhelmed and die. But he was kind of a bad guy anyway. And my character went, you know what? He's not all bad. He did help us a few times. So I jumped up to this crazy epic moment. I don't know how I didn't die, but I could have died. But the GM was like, that was really cool. Guess what? He's now going to be an NPC tag along with your group. and he ended up turning around and saving us against guys that were bad guys or whatever. So taking that bad character in the game, I reformed him, like you were saying earlier. You can reform those bad guys to become good. He became a good guy and ended up standing up for the group and dying on our behalf later on in the story. It just made this really cool arc, in the gameplay. So make a conscious effort to not be good or bad, to kind of be gray area. It makes for really, really cool storytelling. It's my advice.
Yeah, I enjoy the games without alignments at times. Like in my systems, I don't have any alignments. There's kind of paths that you can kind of choose, and I know alignments exist for people to try to stick to that type of character, but the more advanced players, you can definitely do that. You can go from being an evil criminal, just like in real life, to becoming not such a bad guy. I love that about characters. Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, I love that about characters. It just puts so much more depth into the character itself. Being bad and then turning good. Those are some of my favorite characters.
Or vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. Bryce Courtney is one of Australia's top authors of all time, and he talked about character is plot, which is an interesting thing. So it's the evolution of the characters, and it's what the characters are coming up against, and it's the way the characters are interacting with the world that is the story. It's not just, oh, there was a big war or something like that. That's not really interesting unless you've got the characters and you see really what's happening to them. And interesting enough for him, he would research a character for months at a time, and then work out enough of them that he knew what they'd do under most normal circumstances, but then that they could surprise him sometimes, and then they could evolve and change, which is really cool, I think. Funny enough, one of my favorite types of characters to play as a player is the selfish, mean-spirited, annoying character that nobody likes. It's really quite funny. And I've played some games like that, and I'll be the guy that ends up, saving everybody fairly regularly, but usually it's like a party full of neutral kind of characters, the grey area characters, and we all bounce off each other. I wouldn't do it unless that was the game we're playing, because if it was to annoy someone, then I wouldn't. But if it's fun and you're really rolling with it, I played it where I'm a neutral, useless wizard who's got like 3 hit points and 1 spell that can do 2 damage, and all my stats are minuses, and absolutely useless character, right? He's an enchanter that nobody likes, and I'm playing with some other guy who's a maxed out dark orc who keeps looking at me like I'm a snack, and the whole idea was we're going along, we're sort of bickering the whole time, but that friendly kind of bickering. At the same time, he's looking at me, he's like, I could eat you, and I'm like, yeah, let's not do that. Eat that guy. And it was incredibly fun for me as a player. That was the first time I played such a character, and it was a real learning experience. And so I was sort of breaking new ground, as it were. I was like, wow, I can be like this. Oh, that's cool. What if I can be like this, and I'd just do stupid stuff, but it would advance the story. It'd take on more than I could chew, because it's interesting to see if I can get away with it. Make enemies left and right because my character is arrogant, and I know that I'm making enemies, and I'm like, oh, this is going to kill me. And I've seen a lot of players do that, where they're like, oh no, my character's gonna die if I do this. Okay, I do it. I will. Yes, I'll take on that contract. Oh no, it's the mob. And the character would do it, advances the story. In fact, sometimes it makes the whole story. I had a guy who played a drug dealer who needed new drugs, and he promised he was bringing back food, and in fact he was going to bring back drugs to this community. And that was the whole adventure, and the enemies that he made, and it was a one shot, and it was a bloody genius that he just rolled with it, and he was like, cool, okay, this character's horrible. I love him. So it's really interesting how you can do that.
I think that definitely works for groups that can deal with that kind of thing. I would say to players who try to act that way in a new game, where they're the new person in the group, maybe take a back seat for at least a session or 2 before you try that, so that everyone else there can kind of get a feel for you.
Or else
One
you're
thing
just
I
gonna be killed. Yeah.
yeah. One thing that I found in some games that I've run before, because I do a lot of um, open games where no one really knows each other, or maybe two people know each other, or one's played before, but five
Yeah.
haven't. When one person comes into that, maybe two sessions in, and they're brand new to it, and they might be brand new to the game, and they kind of overtake the story. Uh, Hang out for a while. Let your first game kind of be a
Mm.
spectator. Interact, involve yourself, do things, but watch and learn from everyone else around you of what's going on, the dynamic, and then maybe take your point to kind of kick off and become the lead. Um, but yeah, I've noticed that with some people come into games and they're wild and crazy, but it's like, hey, all these other people have been playing for 3 or 4 weeks now, so give them their moment to continue their story before you take it over.
Yeah, be
Yeah.
generous, I think.
Yeah,
Or
generous is
considerate,
good.
I think maybe is a better word.
Yeah, that could be it too. Yeah.
One more thing I wanted to bring up too was stay off of your phone and off of video games while you're playing. Um,
Yeah.
and I know like some people will blame it on the GM, like, well, maybe you should tell a better story, you know. But sometimes that's just not the case. Everybody else could be having fun, and then you know, Joe might have ADD and just, oh, oh yeah, no, I'm not doing anything, you know, just hanging out. What are you guys doing? You know, and totally disrupt everything about the game. So that is a good piece of advice, I think, is to if you're if you're gonna game with everybody, everybody should be, you know, on the same wavelength and focused on the game, and don't disrupt it for other people because you know, sometimes we can only get together once a month, you know. Uh, Not like when we were younger and we could game whenever we wanted, you know. Uh, some people can only get out that once a week or that once a month to game, so this is their special moment, you know.
Yeah,
That's top advice right there. Respect your players, respect the group, and the
Yeah.
home of whoever you're gaming in, or if you're online. Yeah, people have definitely gamed in the background online games. Roll20 is a big place that I play a lot of games on, and it's distracting when you hear in the back of their mic gunfire or orcs yelling at elves, and you're like, "What are you watching? Lord of the Rings in the background,
Yeah.
or are you playing World of Warcraft, or what's going on?" Or you see them on Steam while you're GMing the game and they're playing a game or they just launched something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little disrespectful. If you're gonna do it, be really good about hiding it that way. But it can distract the other people.
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. I think, if you're going to commit, you go in and you go for as immersive as possible. And I think also, a bit of that cooperative storytelling, getting yourself more involved with the story, working with the GM, going, what about this backstory, that back thing, all this sort of stuff. That will add immense amounts to your enjoyability of the game, make it far more magnetic than a computer game will be. I think it's that plot that really, and that emotional connectiveness, or connection rather, that really differentiates a tabletop RPG from an MMO or something like that. MMO, you can chop a lot of things. You can probably chop a lot of things a lot faster than you can in an RPG, uh, and you see the blood, so that's great. But in a tabletop RPG, you can tell stories about characters, what they think, what they feel, how they evolve, and that's your story, and it's never going to be told again. And I think that's genius. That's the cool part about it. So the more you commit to that story, the more you get involved as a player, the more you embellish on it. I think the more it's enjoyable.
Yeah. It's so much more. I'll always be a fan of role playing games. You know, uh, it's got a whole different element. I recommend it to anybody, even who like reading and stuff. I know people that don't have a really strong imagination have a harder time getting involved in it and stuff like that. Um, but it's a whole different level than a video game. You know, you're not constricted by the barriers. Uh, there's no walls. You know. Um, oh, I can't find the green key card. You know. Well, I'll blow the door down. Whatever. But I'll always be a fan, you know.
Yeah, that sort of stuff is actually what makes it so good. You can just keep going around. You don't have to be, oh, gee, I couldn't find the clue. Yeah.
Well,
Good stuff. Well,
I'm good. How long do we want to do this podcast for?
I was just about to say, I think that we've come to our natural conclusion, in fact.
Yeah.
Great minds think alike. Thank you very much for being part of the podcast, and thank you to all our viewers now and in the future. And this is I'm Oliver R. Shead, and this is Brandon Williams and T. Julian Bell, signing off for BrigadeCon 2015. Thanks, guys. Hope this helps.
Have a good one.
Thanks.